Hi, this is Pops. We're here today to bring you a story about a man named August Bernard Coleman. He tattooed in North Fork, Virginia in the 1900s. The book, The Collection, highlights his life. In this book, you'll find flash, stencils, and photographs of that era. When I look at these stencils and flash, I can only imagine what this time was like. In the 1900s, as a young sailor, it must have been the experience of a lifetime to have traveled to parts unknown. As we travel further and further into the Coleman story, we find ourselves caught up in a time when coal-burning monsters ruled the seas and boys became men who sailed the oceans. This was an era of war, politics, Teddy Roosevelt, fashion, the Great Gatsby, the Gibson Girls, flappers, vaudeville, burlesque, and the Great White Fleet. It was a time like no other. I think the story was told best by Paul Rogers. This particular book is put out by the Tattoo Archive, Chuck Eldridge. Most people know about Chuck Eldridge and the Tattoo Archive. Paul says that back in the day, now when I say back in the day, I'm talking about the 1900s, early 1900s. There was a seaport called North Fork, Virginia. Now back in 1907, Teddy Roosevelt decided that he was going to form a peace maritime fleet that could sail around the world to our ally ports to show that we could show up and help them if they ever got in trouble. This book is about Coleman, who tattooed in North Fork, Virginia from 1918 to 1950. He was considered one of the finest tattooists on Maine. His work, his tattoos were considered the epitome of what a professional tattoo should look like. Designs were created by customers. They would come into his place and ask for tattoos. Most of the tattoos were military or Navy oriented. The sailors of the 1900s dressed a lot different than the Navy personnel of today. The tattoos are different also. The Great White Fleet sailed out of North Fork, Virginia in 1907. They traveled around the world. They made several stops. They would actually pull up in the ports, unload their ships of men, materials, or whatever, and row ashore. The sailors of the 1900s would come off their ships on Liberty Call and hit that main street down there in North Fork, Virginia. Coleman, being such a good businessman, realized that the closer he got to the Gaiety Theater on Main Street would attract more sailors to his establishment. They would stand for hours outside waiting to get into the theater. And in doing so, the lines would be blocks long. They would be positioned right in front of his business. In the collection, you will see the burlesque dancers of the era. The Coleman Burlesque Collection is quite evident in the drawings. He created the dancing girls because sailors wanted tattoos that were elaborately decorated. The Burlesque Connection also involves Rose LaRose, who performed at the Gaiety Theater from 1936 to 1960. Rose LaRose's dance troupe performed in 1936 at the Gaiety Theater. The Gaiety Theater was demolished in 1960. Customers would really like the Coleman bracelets. Coleman bracelets were very popular among the sailors. You could get a heart and chain. You could get military designs within the bracelet. Maybe a ship sailing outbound. Or a chain. If you were a sailor and you traveled to, let's say, Japan, you may be interested in some geishas. Paul Rogers when he worked with Coleman, created some of the most beautiful lady heads. They were considered portraits of the era. A young sailor could come in and request his girlfriend. She may be Spanish. She may be a sailor. Or she could be a gypsy. These acetates that were created by Coleman depict what the women of the era pretty much looked like. Mary Ann Smith should be commended for preserving this collection for 37 years. It is now property of the Museum of American Tattooing. The collection, the Coleman story. The Museum of American Tattooing, on display